What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown here in the Eagle Studios, and I'm here with the crew from The Advocate, Wilson Alexander and Leah Van. Both cover LSU out there in Baton Rouge. What's going on, guys?
Just home for
Oh,
Thanksgiving? How y'all?
Doing good. Leah, how are you?
I'm good. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, so I'm home for Thanksgiving, and people are already asking me how TCU can make the playoffs. So
Ah,
that's
Fort
yeah, the
Worth.
culture's a little different over here.
I love me some Fort Worth. Love me some Funky Town. So let's get right into the game at hand this week. It means the world for LSU. Doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot for A&M. We can go whoever wants to start. Just what are the biggest storylines coming into this game for the Tigers?
I was going to say ladies first, but I could get started if you'd like. I guess the biggest storylines is just being able to get past this game with a win and stay in the hunt for the college football playoff. LSU has got to win this game to get to the point where if it can upset Georgia in the SEC championship, then it seems like it would make the playoff. As far-fetched as that maybe seems, just because of how good Georgia has looked, it is still, you play the games for a reason. But LSU, even if it were to upset Georgia, if it's lost to Texas A&M already, then it's not going to make the playoff. And so I think the biggest thing is just for LSU on that end is just winning this game, and the big picture still having a shot at busting into the playoff as the first two-loss team in the CFP history.
Yeah, Leah.
Yeah, I was going to say consistency offensively. I mean, we saw 2 weeks ago against Arkansas. LSU kind of had a little bit of struggles there with it being not only cold, but there were also a lot of players with the flu and all that. And LSU's already down one of their running backs, Armani Goodwin, and then Josh Williams sat out last week with a knee injury, and Jaden didn't have his best game at Arkansas. So I think there have been times this season where the offense has been a little lackluster, but it had been on a hot streak lately. So I think right now, I think the goal is to establish that offensive consistency, especially like going into the SEC championship.
Sure. So I think a guy that a lot of A&M fans will know about and have thought about is Kendrick Perkins, of course, guy who was a finalist in his recruiting with A&M. What have you seen from his progression this year? And I know he's a guy that maybe had a little bit of a slow start, but I think is coming on a little bit. Wilson or Leah?
I'll take this one. So Harold, he kind of like he's moved into a
Harold.
spot where he's strongest right now, and that is the spy linebacker position, which is basically, as you all know, it's just run and go get the quarterback, right? And I wrote a story today about how the defensive tackles are flushing quarterbacks out of the pocket to make that possible, right? Because he's a really fast runner. At the beginning of this season, Kelly was kind of putting him in and he'd make these big plays and he was like, I'm not. And then against Tennessee, Harold hardly played at all because they were in the nickel defense. And Kelly was thinking about making him an inside linebacker. But then he ultimately decided, you know what, we're not going to like teach him all the inside linebacker stuff right now because obviously you have to be able to read a lot more as an inside linebacker. And so he's like, we're just going to use him as a spy. And that's really worked effectively for LSU.
And building off of that, that is certainly where he's kind of maybe made his most flashy plays as a spy. You saw him get chase down Bryce Young and chase down Malik Hornsby at Arkansas as a spy. But what's been maybe particularly impressive is that B.J. Ojolari was talking about this yesterday, is that Harold has some pass rush moves where he's able to come off the edge as well as sort of like a stand-up outside linebacker and just straight rush the passer. And he's really fast. He's got great bend and flexibility. There's some moves that Texas A&M fans will probably see that almost sort of reminiscent of Von Miller in a way. His high school coach actually sent him some Von Miller pass rush clips last season of his sort of patented shoulder dip, and Harold picked it up right away. And he's used it multiple times this season. He's just so fast. Really, probably one of the fastest players on LSU's team. His change of direction speed is incredible. The way he closes is unlike really anything anybody sees. It's interesting talking to LSU players about Harold just because there is a disbelief of him as everybody else is. They start talking about him as if he's just they run out of superlatives, and so does Brian Kelly. And he's got a really bright future. He's already leading the team with 6.5 sacks. He's got 9 tackles for loss. He's been extremely disruptive and the most disruptive player on this team. And probably one of the most disruptive players in college football this season.
See, this is why we have the experts on, because you just have me talking about LSU, and I bring up some obscure NBA player, Kendrick Perkins, instead of, not obscure, but NBA instead of Harold Perkins. Thanks for the correction. So, Wilson, we'll start with you. In that regard, how much of LSU's pass rush has been dependent upon Perkins, or how much is there other guys that are involved with that? Because A&M's offensive line has been pretty porous this season, and pressure on Connor Wigman has been a key to slowing down, even stopping A&M's offense completely.
It's certainly a group effort. Like Leah said a minute ago, the defensive tackles do a lot of work to flush quarterbacks out of the pocket. Mekhi Wingo and Jacqueline Roy have done a pretty good job inside. I think Wingo in particular, simply because he was not expected to be a starter this season. Mason Smith, their star, really would have been one of the best players on this team. Went down first series of the season opener with an ACL, and he's been out, and Wingo stepped up, played a ton of snaps. And those two defensive tackles have made a lot happen, even though they don't necessarily have the pass rush stats. They get after the quarterback on the interior, and that makes life difficult, especially when you have Harold and B.J. Ojulari coming off the edges. Both of them are really talented pass rushers, and LSU's able to rotate a little bit too. I mean, somebody we don't even mention much as a pass rusher, but who's a solid defensive lineman is a senior, Ali Gay. Right behind him is Savion Jones, who's an underclassman guy who's going to rotate in. You'll see him, number 35, on the field some. And he's probably better pass rusher than he is like a run defender. And so it's all kind of working in tandem. And Matt House does a good job of bringing pressure from the edges and from the safety position and sending linebackers at different times and mixing up looks. And so it's hard to know exactly where guys are coming from. But even when they do just rush 3 or 4, they're talented enough to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, so LSU, mobile quarterback. A&M has had difficulty with mobile quarterbacks throughout the entirety of the season. Leah, what have you seen from that position, that progression, and how much has his legs been a factor in this season?
Yeah, so with Jaden, it's been kind of like it's been like a metamorphosis of this offense, right? So I think I asked Brian Kelly a question, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about like how he's designed the offense, and he's really molded it to Jaden's strengths. And it's like, okay, we're not going to stop him from running, but we're going to be strategic about it. So a lot of the run plays that you'll see are like, they're more design plays rather than him, just at the beginning of the season was more just kind of like scrambling out of the pocket and then deciding that no one was open and then just kind of going downfield. Right. So a lot of RPOs, a lot of read options. Like it's really been more strategic. And I think I looked this up a week ago or two about like when he does make up like 50% or around 50% of the rushing yards, LSU's offense tends to do really well. And it also takes some pressure off of the running backs too, because then the other teams don't know what to expect. And so it kind of confuses them. It's helped Josh Williams. He had like his season best game of 122 yards on the ground against Arkansas. So yeah, I mean, and then as a passer, like Jaden's gotten better. He's taking more shots downfield. He's gotten that chemistry with Kayshon Boutte. And he did really well last week against UAB. So Wilson, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, sure. That has been what's been maybe the most interesting thing, is that, like Leah said, at the start of the season, it was running because that's all that they had. And LSU's best play for a while was just Jaden Daniels taking off when there was nothing open, or just when he didn't feel comfortable throwing the ball. But now that they've gotten to the point, it started really you could start to see a little bit of progression in the Tennessee game, but it really took off against Florida when he started just pushing the ball downfield and letting it rip and throwing the ball over the middle and trusting his receivers to go up and make one-on-one catches, because LSU's got a really talented receiver core. That's when his legs started also becoming, like Leah said, something that was it was all incorporated together instead of just sort of being these two very separate entities. They started building plays off of each other and running these zone reads where you could then construct things later in the game off of that similar action, but have it look differently. And Mike Denbrock has been able to build an interesting offense off of that and been pretty successful since the Florida game. With Arkansas is kind of an outlier at this point. We'll see exactly how LSU plays against Texas A&M, but it feels like they really turned a corner the second half of the season. And a lot of that has to do with Jaden's legs, who, he's one of only 4 quarterbacks now in LSU history to have 3,000 total yards of offense. Burrow did it twice, Rohan Davey, and Jamarcus Russell, and Jaden now as well. And part of that is because of his rushing ability.
Jamarcus Russell, I think, was a Jimbo Fisher trainee when he was at his time at LSU. So I think a growing refrain from A&M fans that you'll hear in regards to LSU is that LSU is having the season that A&M fans thought the Aggies would have this season, but they're doing it in year 1 of Brian Kelly. This is year 5 of Jimbo Fisher. What has been like covering Brian Kelly, and how have you seen LSU as a program strategically changed with Kelly as the head coach?
Yeah, I actually really enjoy covering Brian Kelly. He's very thorough. He's a really good interview. I feel like you come out of every press conference learning something new. But I also think he's very comfortable, like, showing his personality here, where I didn't think that he's kind of like the dad who's trying to be cool, but he's not, kind of thing. Whereas like at Notre Dame, I always thought he was kind of just a dry person. And so, I think he's added a lot of organization and stability and discipline to this program. Just hearing about all the systems in place, like players holding each other accountable with these daily questionnaires on, did you get your hydration in? What did you eat? And how much sleep did you get? And also having like some of the leaders that he's had, like our Mekhi Wingo, who's a transfer from Mizzou. Like he's kind of allowed like this team to gel in a way that I think is really hard to do as a new head coach. And I think that he's also brought in a lot of resources. I think Wilson wrote a really cool story on their new nutritionist, Dr. Matt Frakes, and kind of how players, even if they're going out to eat, they can take a little like card with them that will tell them like what kinds of things they can order at like Torchy's Tacos. So it's just very regimented program, very disciplined. Of course, like the special teams hasn't been quite as disciplined this season, but they've worked through those things too.
Yeah, LSU, you'll sometimes hear people around it sort of refer to it as like a luxury car kind of thing, where you need to have somebody who knows how to drive it, because it's the only Power 5 program in a talent-rich state with national championship pedigree, having won 3 in the last, since 2003. And just the infrastructure inside the program had really fractured over the years and needed to be revamped. And Kelly has come in and been able to do that, been able to know how to drive that car because of his experience. It certainly has worked here in year 1 for a lot of the reasons that Leah said there, just in terms of having these players kind of doing the right things and, having sort of these accountability things off the field and getting them to really buy into his process and everything that goes into that. It's worked here in year 1. They're going to have to continue to build. This is a roster that was heavily built up by transfers. A good number of those, particularly in the secondary, are going to be moving on after this season. So it's not necessarily just like, okay, LSU is going to now be in championship contention year after year after year. It seems like it's headed in that direction, but they're going to have to continue to do a good job managing this roster, continuing to build this thing. But it's a great start in year 1, better than anybody would have expected.
So we'll close out with this, and Wilson, we'll start with you. What are the keys to the game for LSU to come out of this with a win?
Mostly, I think it's kind of doing sort of the same thing they've done most of the year. It's like you said, it's getting after the quarterback. It's stopping the run. They've done a good job of stopping the run. And just being able to score enough on Texas A&M, because it seems like Texas A&M still has a pretty capable defense. A lot of these games have been really close. It looked like against 4 of those losses there were by 6 points or less. And so it seems like I think it's going to be a competitive game, especially if Texas A&M is charged up to try to really spoil LSU's season with not much else on the line for the Aggies this year. So I think it's just kind of being able to go on the road and weather the storm, and try to kind of take the lead early and get Texas A&M out of it mentally as early as possible. But in terms of like sort of intricate things, I don't think there's a ton that LSU has to do differently necessarily, but just be able to play its game and protect the football, kind of the basic things.
Leah?
Yeah, I was going through some rankings yesterday. I noticed that A&M has the number 2 passing yards allowed defense. They only allow like 150 per game, and whereas like their run defense is 123rd in FBS football. So that's kind of interesting. So I think that LSU could really capitalize on, running the ball in addition to like maybe having Jaden, get comfortable passing against a really challenging secondary, especially when they're going to go face Georgia next week. I think that, again, just kind of continuing what they're going to do. And one of those things, I think I found this out in baseball season. Somebody was saying it is easier to take something away from someone than to defend what you have. And I think that A&M is probably coming into this game like, we could take LSU out of contention for the college football playoff. Why don't we just, get that big upset and have the big college football, what the heck is going on moment, where it's kind of like a trap game like it was at Arkansas. But so LSU just kind of has to work through the emotions and, stay steady and realize that this is a progression and that this is step one, and the next week they can handle when it comes.
Yeah, Leah, you raise a really good point because A&M's defense has been really good against the pass, but I think as the season has gone on, teams, especially like if you look at Auburn, teams have said, why do we even need to pass the ball when A&M's run defense is that bad? They only had 3 passing attempts in the first half. And they went 3 for 3. So yeah, if you can get a good running game going against A&M, sometimes you don't even need to pass the ball because their run defense has been that bad. Well, guys, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time. Real quick, if you can say where they can find your stuff and find you on social media. I know, Leah, you want a whole bunch of new Aggie followers to follow your stuff. So where can people find y'all?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at lvan_sports. For some reason, Aggies have actually liked a lot of what I've written. I don't know why, but they can. They feel free to follow me. We'll be good.
I'm at WHAlexander_ on Twitter. Then we're both over at theadvocate.com and NOLA.com. And if there's any Aggies out there interested in keeping up with what's going on at LSU, please consider subscribing.
There you go. Thanks, guys. Thanks for taking some time out of your Thanksgiving break. Safe travels down here to College Station, and for everyone watching or listening on the My Aggie Nation podcast, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week to wrap up the season.